But my dad was in the streets until he was about 29. Um, Very tall, moreno, tatted up to the neck, like very, very cholo. And that's kind of how his brothers grew up too. Like many of them weren't able to work legally, so it's like they were in the street.
Mhm.
And I kind of grew up seeing how my family was trying to make a life here, but obviously, you know I realized that my friends didn't have that same family. Like a
Oh,
lot of my friends,
yeah.
um,
You can see the I guess the juxtaposition of it.
exactly,
Like,
like
college
realizing,
word.
okay, some of this, yeah,
Yes,
some of
college.
this is not normal.
Hmm.
But I think one thing that I always grew up was with gratitude, because my dad would always be like, my grandma, she moved here when she was like 60 something, and she worked in a factory as a seamstress. So actually, most of the women on my dad's side are seamstresses, and she was paid, I kid you not, for every garment that she made, she was paid 75 cents. So not even by the hour. She
Wow.
was paid 75 cents. She didn't speak a word of English. And she would come home and she would be like, well, at least I have something to like contribute.
Mhm.
And anytime I would complain about anything, my dad would be like, look at your grandma. Like, she works her ass off all day. She has arthritis. She has all these things, and she doesn't care. Like, she's happy to be able to work. And so, just like knowing that that's like those are the women that I come from. Like, that's the life they had to live,
Mhm.
and they weren't even complaining about it. It was kind of this thing of like realizing, like, I just felt like the world was my oyster. Like, no
Yeah.
matter where I go, it's up.
Yeah.
Like knowing where I come from,
Uh-huh.
and just wherever I go, always moving with gratitude. So yeah, definitely grew up a lot around a lot of addiction, around a lot of you know,
We do have that in common.
craziness.
Definitely grew up in around addiction. Well, recovering addicts. That was my thing.
Absolutely.
Both my parents were recovering heroin addicts. My mom and
Mm,
dad both did time in prison.
yeah.
My dad learned to read in prison. My mom,
Wow.
was on the streets at 13,
Yeah.
and so they both had these very like gritty lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though that's not my experience, having been raised by people who that was their experience, I don't know, it passed on some level of like yeah, gratitude, but also like responsibility. Like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I gotta go up from here.
Yep.
Like it can't. I have this opportunity, this chance that they didn't
Mm-hmm.
have. And although I'm kind of starting, at the bottom, like there's this opportunity that they didn't get. And so I have this responsibility to go for it,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And it could be a lot of pressure
Oh,
sometimes.
yeah, girl.
It could be a lot of
Yeah,
pressure.
it definitely can.
You're like, oh, I'm just gonna break all the cycles, the toxic cycles of my
It's
family.
all going to be me.
In one lifetime. Okay.
Talk to me about a family member who shaped you for better or worse.
Um,
Or if there's
man,
more than one, tell me more than one.
yeah, I would say definitely my tia. One of my tias that I really, really look up to. Her name is Tia Jamie. She watches everything I do, so she's probably watching this.
Shout out, Tia Jamie. We love you.
She's an incredible, incredible woman. Also was born, grew up in Mexico, but came here when she was young. Ended up creating two different nonprofits. Is an entrepreneur, works for herself. But would go out in the streets in Skid Row and talk to people and figure out what people needed on Skid Row and created a nonprofit for them. So, that was always just so inspiring to me, of like knowing people that come from struggle and aren't like, okay, I can get out of struggle, deuces, like,
Yeah.
bye, I'm gonna go live my life. It's like, no, how can I also like bring up people with me? And she just embodied that so much, and I just really admire her. Second would be my dad, because my dad is like, he's still like so like hard, like just that like machismo. Honestly, he grew up that way, so it's like he's that, but he's also so sensitive. And it's so funny because it's
Yeah.
like,
Well,
he's like
usually
such
the
a
people
sensitive
that
gangster.
Oh God, girl, talking to you know what? That armor is what it is. It's that
Yeah.
armor is that the thicker the armor, the softer the inside.
Exactly. And
That-
it's protection.
Mhm.
It's protection more than anything,
Mhm.
and knowing that they had to be that way to survive. So like there was actually a book written about my dad because of like
What?
the craziness of his life. Like, yeah. And it was written by this white man that my dad ended up going to church with. after my dad got out of prison, like for the last time.
Uh-huh.
Because the thing was, it's actually crazy, and I could go on for a long time, but I won't. But basically the court, this was before the 3-strike law was in place, because my dad had beyond 3 strikes, and they were just like, at this point, my dad was like 28, and they were like, look, we're tired of seeing you here, so we're gonna give you another option. You can either go back to prison, do your time for whatever you did, or you can go to a church. You can volunteer for a year, like a ver cómo te va, and if you do well, like you can keep working there and you could be good. So my dad was like, well, I'm not going back to prison, like I'm done with this. My dad goes to the church, works there for a year, somehow gets selected to be the pastor.
The pastor? So your dad okay.
So my dad's preaching to people after a year.
Uh-huh.
And a guy that's working there is an author, and he's written all these Christian books. And my dad just one day tells him his whole story and how he got there. And he was like, this is actually the craziest story I've ever heard in my life. So he writes a book about him. But my dad had this crazy life, and it's so funny now because my dad now lives in Vermont, where my mom was born.
With her?
Like Gringolandia. Like everyone in Vermont is white.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bernie
you know?
Sanders. Bernie's not
There
just
you go.
white. Bernie Sanders white.
Exactly.
That's another type of white.
Exactly. And my dad lives there. He's the only Mexican man, like for miles. And he just has a little garden.
Uh-huh.
He has like, you know, the meat burner that they burn the al pastor meat on?
Uh-huh.
He has one in his garage. He just roasts his meat.
Okay.
He gardens. And that's his life. And like he's so happy, and I'm just like, that's goals.
Yeah, that is
know?
goals. It's this the closer to my dad's end of his life, like once my dad went through his addiction and through his he got out of prison, and when he got out of prison he went back into his neighborhood of Lincoln Heights here in East LA. And he helped. He was the first guy to get clean. And he is responsible for over 30 guys getting clean from the neighborhood.
Wow.
So I always say my dad never had to leave East LA to change the world, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like this, it's the idea with same idea as your dad is that you can change.
Mm-hmm.
You can change. And it's the idea that we are just who we are, and this is how we are always going to be, and there's no way to be a different way. Like that, get that idea out of your mind, because if people like our fathers could change,
yes,
then anyone can.
Yes.
You know, that really gives me chills.
I know.
That's real.
100%. That's real. And every time I talk to my dad, he's just like, if I'm ever going through something, he's like, mija, it's actually so poetic. Like, I think my dad is more of a poet than me, but he'll just be like, mija, you just plant your seeds and you grow your flowers and you don't worry about anything else. And he like has his little jardín. It's so cute. It's so cute.
So did you grow up speaking Spanish with your dad?
So I did. It was kind of more of a thing of like, my dad would always speak to me in Spanish and I would reply in English. But my grandma didn't speak English, so I would always speak Spanish with her, but like very pocha, you know? And so I actually didn't. I mean, I was fluent growing up, but it wasn't until when I was 21, I worked for a year in public schools as a like teacher assistant. But because there was
an aide,
kind of. So I worked with AmeriCorps.
Because I was an aide.
Okay,
instructional aide. Are we the same person?
What is happening? But I felt.
Get out.
Ya me voy. I felt it though. I was like, I feel like we have so much in common. But so I worked for AmeriCorps in a program called City Years.
Is that like Teach for America?
It's basically like the level before Teach for America. Yeah. You
Okay.
basically help in schools in whatever way they see fit. So, and again, this is back to like the educational system. They had no one. There was at least 10 students in the classroom, in my classroom, 4th grade classroom. They did not speak English. There was not any teacher aide to speak Spanish to help them figure out what was happening in the class. So they were like, oh, you speak Spanish? You'll be the ESL teacher. And I was like, I mean, I don't have a certification, but
okay,
yeah,
here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did that, and that was a beautiful experience because I got to be with my kids the whole year. But where was I going with that story?
That experience is what this poem was born from, right?
Exactly.
Because at the 2017 National Poetry Slam Finals, where were we? In
this is actually
Denver.
Where we first met, no?
Yeah, that's how I met you. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was in the audience when this poem she got up on stage and just fucking blew the roof off the whole place.
Thanks, girl.
I'm gonna play a little bit of it because this is the thing that just made me feel so connected to you so early. Not only because you're up there speaking Spanglish, but because of feeling the same way that you feel when you're in a classroom and you're watching students be left behind, and you're watching you're watching the prequel to what someone's life is gonna be like, because they're constantly excluded.
Yeah.
And so this I'm gonna just play some of the poem.
Okay.
Of course, and is the first to raise his hand for every question. But Miguel views letters in a different way than most, because there are a lot of words in Spanish that do not exist in English. He learns how to pack them in a suitcase and forget. Because many phrases translate backwards when crossing over from Spanish to English. Throughout the whole song, he tends to say things in the wrong order. So when I ask him to sing the second verse, it sounds like, and the rocket's red glare, we watched our home bursting in air. It gave proof to the night that the flag was still theirs. They say music is deeply intertwined with how we remember. Miguel hears a marimba and learns the word home. Hears his mother's accent being mocked and learns the word shame. Hears his mother's weeping and learns the word sacrifice. He asks, what does the word America mean? What does the word dream mean? I say two words with the same meaning are what we call synonyms. You could say America is a dream, something we all feel silly for believing in. He says, teach me how to say bandera. Teach me how to say star. Teach me how to hide my country behind the consonants that do not get pronounced, Miss Angelica. Teach the letters to just flee from my lips like my parents and build a word out of nothing. In my tongue, we do not pronounce the letter H. Home is not a sound my voice knows how to make.
This poem, man. This is
I
the
was
poem
so
that
nervous on this stage.
girl, you know what's crazy is like you can't even see it. Like you're channeling at this point.
I think so. 'cause
What
I
was
don't
that
even-
experience? This has 60,000 views or some shit like that. How much is
This
lot.
actually just recently went viral on TikTok, and that's actually why I did the campaign. They were like, "We saw this video about the Star Spanglish Banner, this, that, and the third," and so that's why the campaign happened. But doing it, I think I completely agree with you about channeling, because I think I just I felt like I blacked out.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as I started,
I know that feeling.
And that room was huge.
Yeah, that was
It
a
was
big
terrifying.
room. Was that the largest audience you had performed in front of up until that point?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How old were you right here?
When I was with Haley House, I think I was 20.
What team was this?
Dang, what does that say?
2017?
2017?
Yeah.
8, 9, 10, 11. I was 22.
And when did you start getting into the poetry slam world?
The year before.
Wow.
It was very random. It was I shared a poem, and then Portia, the coach, who is still one of my good friends and is an amazing person, was like, "No, you got to do this more."
Yeah.
And then it was just everything snowballed, and then
man.
And then so much pressure that final
who
stage.
won that? Who won this year? Who knows? I don't remember. Did you guys win?
Did it happen this year? Oh, this year.
No, that year. Yeah.
That year we were in third.
Okay.
Who was first?
I think DPL won Maybe DPL won.
I think so.
I think DPL won.
I was gonna say, I think so.
Yeah. Because I went that year to go support them.
Yeah.
And I showed up. I surprised Jessica just randomly, and then but yeah, that was I remember that poem, and I remember the way I felt listening to that poem. And I don't know if I came up to you after or wrote you a message, and I was like, girl, what was that? Because it's the combination of the singing and the poetry and the sentiment, it's all of those things, because in your work, you mix your poetry with your music the same way you mix your English with your Spanish, know. And so speaking of music, I want to know what was the soundtrack to your childhood, because my parents did me a big solid. I have a fire ass soundtrack. I might not have had the best childhood, but the music was fire.
I feel like that's the formula, though. It's the worse the childhood, the better the music,
Yeah.
I love that question. I think I had the best musical influence growing up because of my dad. My dad would play rancheros. My dad would play corridos, but my dad would also play like cholo music. So we play like West Side Connection.
Uh-huh.
He would play
Did he
Snoop
play
Dogg.
oldies?
He played oldies. He loved, because again, my dad very sensitive, loved like Motown. My dad loved Aretha
Oh,
Franklin.
hell yeah.
My dad loved Otis Redding, Fats
Mhm.
Domino, like that just soul that really just hits you
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
in your toes. Like
Yeah. What's a
that.
song that reminds you of your dad?
I'll Try Something New by The Miracles. That was my dad's song.
Okay. And so that was was music always on around you?
Always, always. And it wasn't just like it would be there. My dad would make me listen to it, and he would be like, "Mija, they don't make music like this anymore."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it was just like, I was like,
what year was your
okay.
dad born?
My dad was born 1960.
My dad was born in 1947.
Oh dang.
That fool.
I feel like your dad and my dad would have been friends for sure.
Let's hear.
This was in the car all the time.
So this is you. How old are you listening to this song with your dad in the car?
I think I was probably 11,
Mm.
just jamming out.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
My dad would be like, listen to the lyrics.
Yeah. They don't make music
They
like
don't
this.
make music like this
No, they
anymore.
don't.
But they really don't.
And so music was.
Oh, this makes me so nostalgic.
Oh, I love that. That's what we need, because we
I love
need
this
that stuff to
podcast.
come out of. Oh, thank you. We need that stuff to come out of you, because that's what brings us. I don't know, the gold that's in there. I only talk to people, like there have been people that have that. That's my daddy.
Oh.
So yeah, that's like, I know that vibe. I know that
Yeah.
vibe. And he was a teacher, and he would get up, and my dad had 27 years clean and sober from heroin, and he would get up on stages all over East LA and even somewhere farther sometimes, and they would ask him to share his story and inspire others. And that has a lot to do with being a little kid and watching him and seeing what he does, and knowing that, seeing people share their truth in these meetings, it was like that was my introduction to how to do it, you know. And so bringing that truth out of other people is the goal that I have, because I know that there are people that have so much wisdom, and you can see it in their art, and I can see it in your art. And so when I think about the soundtracks to our childhood, like there's so much poetry in music. So where did you get your love for poetry?
My love for poetry, I think, to be honest, my love for music came first, for sure. And just a side note, I think it's just so beautiful to see your dad, doing his thing, but then also to see how you have like mirrored him in this way in this podcast.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's
Thank
so beautiful.
you.
But poetry, the first book that I really loved of poetry was Anais Nin.
Oh, Anais.
Anais. Is it Anais?
I think Anais Nin. Yeah.
Anais Nin.
Uh-huh.
My bad, Anais. So
we love you, girl.
Shout out. And I really loved her because I read her, I think, when I was like 15, and she was the first woman I ever heard just speaking so openly about her sexuality and just like owning her experience and being so vulnerable about her experience and feeling seen kind of for the first time in that way in my womanhood through a book and through someone's words. And I was like, damn, this is powerful.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where like my love started for it, but I didn't even know that I would write it until like time after, but definitely that's where it started.
Who do you consider your poetry ancestors? Like living actually people you don't know, and then also people you do know, because those of us that have grown up in the poetry community know that there are these living legends that we get the opportunity to be around and to kind of just soak up this, I don't know, soak up their energy and their craft. These people are, masters of what they do, and we have the luxury and the privilege of being in their presence and seeing them perform and being able to absorb the parts of that give us the courage to do our performances. So who are some of your poetry ancestors?
Oof, I think probably my top two would be Sophia Sinclair, just because I love her work so much, and Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
That woman just was so powerful.
Mhm.
Outside of her writing, just the way that she lived her life, the way
Mhm.
she embodied what she wrote
Even
about.
when she spoke.
Yes.
When she spoke, you shut up.
Yep.
You listen. When she spoke, you listen.
Yes,
And that,
exactly.
I mean, and her poetry is groundbreaking. It's trailblazing. It's like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That writing was the first of its kind, you know?
Right.
And she's all of our poetry ancestor for sure.
Yes. And just knowing her story, like even knowing that she started as a sex worker,
Mhm.
which is something a lot of people don't talk about
Yeah.
because of respectability politics.
Yeah.
But, just an amazing story, an amazing woman.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you have been a part of some really cool poetry anthologies. Tell me about that.
Yes. It's funny. That's kind of like what made me really push me to put out a book, because I was like, at this point, I'm part of 3 different anthologies and I don't have my own book out yet.
Yeah.
And it was really just me not like taking the time to do it. But the first one that I was part of was the Latinx.
Yeah.
Latinx anthology with the Breakbeat Poet anthology.
Yeah.
That was incredible because
And that came out in New York.
But it came out during the pandemic. Unfortunately, we were supposed to all get together and do an event, you know. But pandemic. But it was just incredible.
The pandemic, that was the wrong one. It was supposed to be this one.
Wait, let's do it again. But the pandemic.
The pandemic.
And but just to be part of an anthology with so many people that I admire and so many people I respect.
Yeah, who was in there? Elizabeth, she's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Velasquez. Shout out to When We Make It, her new book. Definitely go check that out. I downloaded it on audiobook. I'm still working on 2 books in front of it, but it is in line. I already bought it, girl. So I love you. And I got to perform with her years ago in New York when it was like I got my first show in New York.
Oh, cool.
And that was like, it was her, Melissa Oliva Lozada, Vanessa Marie Marco, shout out my best friend.
Yep.
And Elizabeth Velasquez, and I think that was it. But we had when you like seen where people start, and then you see where they go. Oh, I love seeing her win, girl. She really put her shit. She did her shit. Like she didn't just say she wanted this life. Like she actually worked for it, and she documented the entire process on Instagram. And that's what I think is the most valuable part about it, is that she didn't let her journey be in vain at all. Like she has used all of the things that she has learned on the way to publishing her book. With who did she publish this? A big ass publisher.
A really big one.
Yeah, girl, man. Shout out to, I want to get her on the podcast too. So shout out to her.
Shout out.
Go follow her, Elizabeth Velasquez Poetry. I believe it is. But anyways, so yeah, those poetry anthologies are what inspired you to write your own book.
So the poems that were selected for the Latinx, another one is the Latinx Poetry Project by Alegria Publishing, and the last one was an anthology called Poems for Girls Becoming Themselves on Workman Publishing, and that was released just last year. And it was, all of those poems had already been kind of in a collection that I had wanted to put out for a minute. And then I was like, they're being selected for anthologies. Why don't I put them out? Why don't I do the work of like getting a publisher and putting them out? So I think in a way it was kind of just like validating to know that these poems were being loved and were being appreciated. And then it just all made sense the way that they worked together. So then that's when I decided to put out They Call Me.
So how does it feel to be published?
It feels great. It feels great. Like I said, I think whenever I do something like big in my career or in my life, I think of where I come from, and I never forget that. And it amazes me that I get to live the life that I live, and I get to live as an artist, and I get to do these incredible things. So like, it's incredible, like not because it's like, oh, I did this. It's like, I get to do this,
Yeah.
And so
definitely,
it's beautiful.
I published my book in 2016 with the World Stage Press, and I always tell the story of my book release party because so before I went on this kind of like healing journey of figuring out how to like love myself and like myself, and even be able to manage my emotions and just learn how to be present.
Yeah.
The day of my my book release, one of them, at the Armory in Pasadena, I completely ruined my own night. I could not focus on anything other than the people who didn't show up.
Girl,
I didn't like
I've
my
done that
makeup.
so
I
many
didn't like how I
times.
look. I was mean to my mom. I was a fucking ungrateful little brat.
Mhm.
Could not let myself feel any joy or happiness because I wanted to focus on the people that weren't there. And
Yeah.
I remember, and I feel so bad for that girl, me, you know, like at that
Right,
time, like
right,
I feel
right.
so bad for her. Like she was completely unable um, to separate how she was feeling from what was actually happening
Mhm.
around her. And so I was not able to be present. What was your experience like last night at your book release? And yeah, tell me what it was like.
Yeah. It's so interesting for me to hear that because I see myself in that so much of like having this incredible thing happening and you're like, but I'm missing a nail.
Yeah, girl,
I'm out. I'm out.
I'm
Se acabó.
out.
You
That
know?
man,
I
it's-
relate to that so much, so much. And it really is work. It's work on what you are choosing to focus on. Where are you putting your energy?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I get there. And of course, like ansias.
yeah,
But, you know, I just looked at the fact that my tias were there, my primas were there. And one of my primas, like young, and she just the way that she is just like, I'm so excited about what you're doing. And like getting to have her see me do something and know that she could do something like that too is just really special. And so it was like, okay, am I going to focus on the fact that, you know, I'm worried about how people are going to look at me, or I'm worried about if I'm going to say this poem right, or am I, you know, it's like, am I going to worry on that?
yeah.
Or am I going to focus on the fact that I have my whole family here
Mm-hmm.
supporting me, loving on me? I
Mhm.
have a book, I have a whole publishing company that believes in me, you know?
Yeah,
And it was like the moment came where I was like, I choose that.
yeah.
You know? And
Mhm.
because of that, I was able to enjoy it. I had so much fun. I connected with so many people.
I'm so happy
and
to hear that.
thank you. It was great.
Congratulations. That's a really
Thank
big accomplishment. And I hope that
you.
you are like completely present for like the joy of that. Like, you know, when things
Yes.
happen, a lot of times when you are muy busy, you just keep going and you don't
So
really let yourself
true.
like live in the goods or the bad.
It's so
You just
true.
keep going.
Or you're
And
like, what's next?
yeah.
What's the next thing I have to worry about?
Mhm.
What's on my to-do
Exactly.
list?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So tell me about your book. How did you structure it? What are the poems about? What state of mind were you in when you wrote it?
So the book is called They Call Me. Basically, so it's in English and Spanish, it's in Spanglish, and it's really focused on everything that I've been called in both English and Spanish. That has been meant to offend me or, you know, shame me,
Mm-hmm.
and finding a way to empower myself through those words. So some of the poems, they call me bien creída, they call me chismosa, they call me bitch, they call me this. And it's basically all of those words I find a way to empower myself with.
Do you have anything memorized?
Oh,
Or maybe not, but what's your favorite poem in the book?
my favorite poem is probably They Call Me Bien Creída.
Okay.
And it goes into, you know, this idea of they call me bien creída. This girl is so full of herself.
Mm-hmm.
But what would they prefer me to be?
Yeah.
Right? What's the opposite of full?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I have done all this work to become full of myself. I've spent so many nights empty in order to teach myself how to become full of myself. Bien creída.
Wow.
Así soy.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really, really, really. Oh, gave me chills. Hey, girl. Wow. I wanna ask more about music because your music definitely is a vibe, and it you know, it's just, this is beautiful music. Who are some of your musical influences?
Like I said, I think I'm so blessed to have grown up with so many different ones, but I'm very, very inspired by, like I said, like the sound of R&B, of soul, of Motown, like just that type of singing that just rips your soul out. And I'm also really inspired by female MCs, by Lauryn Hill, by Erykah
Yeah.
Badu,
Mm.
and just women that have used, been the writers of their music and used their music as a vehicle to say what they want to say.
Mhm.
Queen Latifah,
Yeah.
really inspires me as well. Yeah,
How would you describe your sound?
I would describe my sound as a touch of R&B, touch of soul, in Spanglish.
Add the Spanglish in there. And it's so funny. The next question was talk to me about Spanglish and why it is so important for you to include in your work. I read a quote from you that said, an accent is just a mother tongue that refuses to let her child go.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that and talk to me about Spanglish.
Yeah, I always say that I think Spanglish is a legitimate language.
Definitely.
And a legitimate dialect. And it's funny because in Mexico City, it's kind of seen as like, people be like, oh, you're so pocha, like, you
Yeah.
don't just speak full Spanish, but so many of us have such a nuanced experience.
Oh yeah, girl.
Of how we grew up, of the cultures that we grew up with, and for so many of us, speaking Spanglish, it's a necessity. It's like it's our way of keeping our two worlds. And it's funny because when I first put out Me Vale, I was like, I'm putting it out in Mexico City. I went on the radio to promote it.
Mhm.
So I'm like, oh, only people in Mexico are going to listen to it. And when I looked at the stats, it was split right down the middle. People from the US, people from Mexico.
That's very symbolic.
And so I think it's so cool to be able to like reach this amount of people through, both languages.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's something that comes really natural to me, but it's also really exciting to me. And I think there's so many people that consider Spanglish as their normal dialect.
Yeah. That's their
So-
Spanglish is their first language.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
So talk to me about your TED Talk. I watched it and where was yours?
Because you also did a TED Talk.
Yeah, I did in 2017, and I think
Okay.
you did yours that year after.
Yes,
2018.
2018.
Where did you do yours at?
I did mine in Vail, Colorado.
Uh-huh.
It was to be very transparent, it was not exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was kind of a lot of, I didn't realize how much was going to be censored of what I wanted to say and the way that I wanted to say it. So it was kind of a lot of like back and forth between me just wanting to do what I wanted to do, which was interesting.
The title of the TED Talk is "Why We Don't Love Ourselves," which is a great fucking title. A great title.
Yes. So the theme of the TED stage that year was yes, which to me is very vague.
Hella vague. They love doing shit like that because they're like, well, okay, talk about anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought the idea that came to my mind is like saying yes to ourselves, right? And I didn't want to just do like a talk about self-love of like, this is how you love yourself. And I was like, well, if I'm learning to love myself, I need to talk about all the barriers that exist for me to be able to love myself, you know? And so that was really what the talk was about. But yeah, I think overall it was a valuable experience, but it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Well, in the talk, you talk about your struggle with an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And how I want to know how that pain molded you into who you are now.
That's a good question.
How not only the pain, but overcoming the pain.
Yeah. I think it was a long process for me. It was, I think the eating disorder started when I was about 14. And it was really just like when I look back at it, and I think for a lot of girls, it's like a way for you to feel like you have control over something if you grow up in a very chaotic environment.
Yeah.
And then match that with, you know, this obsession to look a certain way.
Perfect.
Because we're taught to be perfect, right? And we're taught that our value depends on how we look.
Yeah.
Being consumed by that, and then being consumed by this need to control something in my life was really toxic. And so that lasted for a long, long time. And it was really when I kind of, it seems like you kind of went through this too, of being like, okay, I need to fully dedicate myself to my healing journey.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just something that I'm going to like think about every now and then, or like, oh, I should do this. It's like, no, I'm going to dedicate myself and commit myself to teaching myself to take care of myself. That I feel like I really overcame that. And I had to realize how to have a new relationship with food, with exercise, and do it from a place of love for myself and
Mhm.
not from a place of judgment of
Yeah.
how I should look or how I should be.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that pain is real, man. Like overcoming the pain is what it's if it's not an eating disorder, it's for me it was an addiction to pills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like it's these things that we do to try and numb ourselves.
Yep.
And you know, it's this form of it's a form of self-harm. Well, I mean, definitely it's a form of
Yeah.
self-harm, but it's like that the pain is kind of like the gift and the curse.
Yeah.
You know, because the pain, if you can figure out a way to love yourself out of the pain,
Mhm.
then oh my god, the rewards are just endless, boundless, like endless opportunity.
Yeah.
But if you can't, your pain can eat you alive. Your pain and your fear can be quicksand. It will swallow you whole.
Mhm.
And it's just it's difficult to talk about that. How do you feel when you talk about that part of your life?
I think in a way, luckily, I look at kind of in the way of you being like you talking about the version of yourself at your book release, right? It's like I see her as a different person.
Yeah.
And I feel so proud to be able to, see her that way and be like, pobrecita, she
Yeah.
really believed that all these things that didn't really mattered.
Yeah.
And to be able to look at it from the lens of outside is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And it's a result of that healing journey,
Definitely is. It makes me proud, like it makes me proud to see how far I've come. But it also does, like I said, I look back and I feel bad for her. I know she was alone. I know she was just like literally just trying. My dad had just died in 2011 and I was trying so hard to like find validation outside of myself, like trying to numb that pain because I had no idea how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so because I called it when I finally decided to deal with it in 2019, summer of 2019 is when I stopped the pills. I called it my season of self. How long have you been in your season of self? And I guess what have you learned so far?
I love that. Season of self. I love that.
It was the summer of self, but then when I figured out that this shit was gonna be a long ass journey, I was like, it's gonna have to be longer than the summer. The summer is not a long enough time because I need some more time on this bad boy.
Extended. Yeah.
So it's just in a season because just a season that never an endless season.
Endless season.
Yeah.
Yes. I would say for me, my season of self probably started, I would say like leve 2 years ago, but like really committing to it just this last year.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way, like, I swear to God, when you just put your energy into what is best for you, the way that the universe is like, oh, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. It
Okay.
rises to meet you where you're. Yeah.
The way that it matches you with opportunities, with, things that you didn't even think were possible. The way that has like worked for me this last year is incredible.
Yeah.
Is incredible. And I think, that's kind of what goes back to my book. It's like this idea, right? That it's like we tell women, oh, just love yourself.
Yeah. Without
it's
giving
like,
them any blueprint or
any tools. But then when the woman gets to the place where she was like, hell yeah, I love myself, then it's like, oh, calm down. Don't be cocky.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, te crees muy. Oh.
Or what is bien creída?
Bien creída. Oh,
Yeah.
whoa. And it's like, well, what do you want from me?
Yeah. Which one? Neither one is good enough.
Neither one.
Neither one is good enough. And
exactly.
It's this unattainable standard of perfection that is completely false.
Made up. Yeah.
And it's made up to make you because if you're constantly seeking validation outside yourself by trying to be perfect, whether that is physically or in your job or trying to look like you have it all together, it's still the same. It's still as damaging. It's extremely damaging, and it's a process that can only be reversed by like being willing to face your pain head on.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say was the rooted deep pain that made you, I guess, that gave you this disorder of the, how did that How did that start?
And I think that's interesting, right? Like to think of like all of the things we will do to avoid facing our pain.
Yeah.
You know, all of the things. So
Mhm.
for me, I think it's, and I think for most people, it's the same thing, right? It's like at the very bottom, at the very core, it's that I'm not good enough.
Yes.
The way that I am is not good enough.
Yeah. That's that it's a very simple but very like deep
Yeah.
rooted pain, and
Mhm.
it's not a unique experience.
Mm-mm.
Like the experience is unique, but the sentiment is the same across the board for many of us, especially, and it weirdly very most of the talented people I've ever met feel that way.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
feel in some way, you know, which in a weird also way, like therapy has shown me that, like, oh, all of this, including this podcast, including the TED Talk, including the book, including every single thing I've ever done, is because I didn't feel worthy, because I needed that external validation. Not because I was so outstanding that I was like, let me show the world how outstanding it was. It was, I'm going to show you what I could do, and I'm just going to be what you need me to be in order for you to think that I am
Good enough.
worthy. Yeah.
And that's so true. And so many successful people are successful not because, you know, it's their dream or whatever. It's they're trying so hard to prove to people that they're enough because they don't believe it.
Yeah, definitely.
Ooh,
this has been
went deep.
I know. Well, this, you know, this conversation has
deep.
gone there and back, and I'm happy to have you here. Like, I feel like now, did we just become best friends?
I think so.
I think we
Are
did.
we the same person?
Maybe.
Where can I buy one of these?
One of these?
I
don't
carry it
know.
in my car.
You can just take this one with you.
Yes.
So before we go, what are you about to go do right now?
So I have a show at
Closer.
Oh, my bad. I know I keep like drifting over here. I have a show at 7. Oh, but I have a little time. I'll probably get a little coffee, do a little bit of work in the meantime.
Yes, make
Maybe
it work.
Get a taco. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So your show is at the Regent?
It's at the Regent Theater, yeah.
Is it just you, or are you doing with other poets?
It's actually like a variety show. So there's gonna be poets, there's gonna be musicians, and then there's gonna be like true crime readers.
What? What is this event called? Like this. I know.
It's called The Witching Hour.
Dude, you know what?
Big bruja energy, to be
Big
honest.
bruja energy.
You can still get tickets tonight if you want to.
You definitely can. How do you get tickets?
They're on Ticketmaster.
Okay.
Go to witchinghourlive.com.
The thing that I was gonna say is that poetry has put me in some of the most random scenarios of like
say more,
like being just like you know, that you're in like someone's corporate office teaching them, like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're like, this is not even on my business card, but people will, because they know you're creative. If that's what's funny, is that people will be like, you would probably be good for this and this. Like, I just hosted a Dia de los Muertos event in Pasadena. I had never hosted nothing before in my life. And I'm saying yes because I'm scared to do it. So I'm like, I figured this is the cheat code. This is the cheat code to like liking yourself and growing, is just, instead of running from the things that scare you, actually doing them.
Yes.
And that has been like one of the biggest lessons I've learned from my season of Self. But before we go, I just want to hear some I want to hear, where are you going? What are your next big plans for music? What is coming next for you?
Yes. So I, in February, have like a big showcase of, it's basically a performance where I'm performing for a lot of people that will hopefully hire me. And so in the meantime,
is it NACA or what?
It's that type of event.
Okay.
Yeah. And so in the meantime, I'm working on my first EP, which is like a mini CD. It's going to be about 6 songs. So my producers that are in Mexico City are waiting for me, and just these next until February, we're just going to be in the studio nonstop to make sure that it's perfect. You may see another video coming, but that's the baby right now. It's the EP.
Yay. Well, I want to ask one more question before we go, and I want to thank you before I ask this question. I want to thank you for being here, for coming here, sharing space with me, sharing yourself with me. I know I asked some deep questions. We went there and back. But I want to ask you, how do you want to be remembered?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I want to be remembered as someone that used their pain to create something beautiful
Mm.
and connected with as many people as possible in my path and helped as many people as I could while I was on that journey of transforming pain into art.
Yeah. Transforming pain into power.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing, girl, and I'm proud of you.
Thank
I love seeing you
you.
win. Congratulations on your book.
you so
Congratulations on these music
much.
videos and everything you're doing.
Hey.
This has been the Millennial Mija podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
We did it. Oh, stop it. Oh.
Bueno.
Hola, estoy bien, gracias.
That's crazy though.
I know.
Every
There's so
time
many.
you brought something up, I was like, is everybody talking about
I
me?
know. It's like I don't know. This podcast is weird. Like it's
Really?
magical like that. It's been weird. Like people that I didn't know I had anything in common with. Like because I was like
Yo te marco.
a little.
2025.
I feel like I didn't have enough time to research and everything like that.
Yeah.
But then once I started, it was just like, like it just came so naturally easy that I was like, oh, this is a little weird. Because usually I have to work harder. You know, I'm like, fuck, I needed like more time to prepare and all that. But this shit worked out really, really well, and I'm really happy. It was
And I
great.
love this studio.
Oh, I gotta end this broadcast.
I gotta
Look
do
how we
a
look on
selfie before I
YouTube.
go, though.
Hideous.